sit back and relax. You're listening to episode 276 of the Wealth Tech Today podcast. And I'm your host, Craig Iskowitz, founder of Ezra Group Consulting. And this podcast features interviews, news, and analysis on the trends and best practices all around wealth management technology. My guest for this episode was none other than Jeff Yabuki, CEO of InvestCloud. We had a pretty wide-ranging conversation, which I think you will enjoy. We spoke about a couple of interesting topics. One, Jeff's transition from CEO of Fiserv, a publicly traded company, to CEO of InvestCloud, a private company owned by partially by Motive Partners, which he's the chairman of, PE firm. We talked about the challenges InvestCloud faced and how Jeff worked to rebuild the trust with clients, partners, and employees. We talked about InvestCloud's new release of a personalized managed accounts product that allows for alternative investments to be held in a managed account. And we talked about the potential impact of a new political administration and the regulatory environment. Now, InvestCloud has hundreds of clients, and among them are some of the largest broker-dealers down to individual RIAs. And all these firms know the importance of a solid tech stack to support their business growth. Here at Ezra Group, we've seen tech stacks of literally hundreds of RIAs and broker-dealers, and let me tell you, most of them are loaded down with tech debt. Let's face it, tech debt can act like an anchor holding down your RIA's efficiency and ability to scale. If you want to free your firm for exponential growth, you need to run, not walk to our website, EzraGroup.com, and click the golden Contact Us button on the homepage. The experienced team at Ezra Group can evaluate your current tech ecosystem, deliver targeted recommendations, optimize your existing systems and operations, or even run an RFP and help you implement new software to take your firm to the next level. Ezra Group just makes tech stacks better. You can take advantage of our free initial consultation by going to EzraGroup.com. And now, the standard housekeeping tasks. Please subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And check out our sponsor, the Invest in Others Charitable Foundation at investinothers.org. And now, let's kick this thing off. And I'm excited to introduce my next guest. It is Jeff Yabuki, CEO of InvestCloud and chairman of Motive Partners. Hey, Jeff, welcome, man.
Thank you, Craig. Great to be here. Thanks for taking some time. Excited to talk to you about the future of wealth.
I'm glad you could be here. Where are you calling in from?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
See, I always like to complain to people, I'm in New Jersey, how cold it is, but you got me beat.
Oh, not even close. It's not even close. I have to laugh when I'm in the city and I hear people complaining about 25 degrees. I always ask, is that above or below zero? That's context that's important.
Yeah, you guys know what it's like, what cold is like. Yeah.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
So let me just jump right in here. So congratulations on your finishing your first year as CEO of InvestCloud.
Thank you.
Not easy to do. So you came from a large publicly held company, Fiserv, with 14 billion in revenue, coming to InvestCloud, which is large for our industry, but relatively tiny compared to that. So what were some of the drivers behind you taking this role?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've had that any number of times. I guess at the very top of the list, I love business and the whole the complexity, the aspect of leading people, working with people, and in this industry especially, where you have an opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives, like it doesn't get much better than that. And the other thing you mentioned in the intro, I'm the chairman of Motive Partners, and InvestCloud is a very important part of the Motive portfolio of companies. And so we did a search. We didn't like, frankly, what we saw as a result of the search. And Rob Havart, the founder of Motive, said, Jeff, can you do me a favor? And I said, it depends on what it is. And he said, would you be willing to run InvestCloud? And I said, I'm always willing to help. So a year later, here I am.
And that's an interesting whole dynamic there, because obviously Motive was involved with lifting out the APL division, the investment services division of Fiserv from Fiserv. So you were involved in that, and then converting that into Tegra, then merging that with InvestCloud, and now you're sort of full circle back here, right? So how does that feel, from that whole change?
Yeah, it's interesting. The good news for me is I have a lot of familiarity with that business. We purchased it in 2007. When we bought this business, we bought it from a company called CheckFree,
Hmm.
which is the biggest bank-based payments company in the world. And I remember having a real conversation with Pete Kite, the founder, and said, "Well, why do you own this business?" And he said, "Jeff, I love networks." And
Hmm.
that's always stuck with me. And as you know, as we're out focused on the PMA, which I know we'll talk to in a bit, right? The concept of creating another network to complement what's been built in APL, we think is an incredible opportunity. And again, selfishly for me, I've worked with Cheryl Nash since 2007. I know the business. And so it changes the slope, it eases the slope of my learning curve, and that's always a good thing because we have to move fast. It's about speed, velocity, quality, excellence, those kinds.
Exactly. And in full disclosure, Fiserv, well, Cheryl's division of Fiserv had hired Ezra Group many times to help with strategy and software deployment. I never met you um, during those times, but we met your team, some of the senior executives, and boy, were they sharp.
That's
I
great.
mean, going into some of the meetings, we were like a little nervous going in because we were going to get basically, everything or an X-ray of everything we're doing. So it's a really, really sharp team you had there at Fiserv.
Oh, thank you for that. And thank you for the compliment about the X-ray. That's something that we prided ourselves on, the ability to go deep when we needed to go deep.
So talking about the CEO team and the executive team, you came into this particular role at what I think people would consider a turbulent time in the company's history, after basically the executive team was dismissed. So you're coming into that very, a lot of things going, a lot of upheaval. What's your plan? Well, how did you recover from that? How do you rebuild trust with clients, partners, and employees?
Yeah. So another good question. Look, I like like each of our own lives, businesses have cycles and phases, and and this was an inflection point in the history and the future of the company, right? Founders, the founder of InvestCloud, right, built built a very strong technology capability. Right? We've got many clients who are very satisfied to be on that. But the ability to industrialize, scale, expand, integrate, do the things that are necessary to build a world-class business are often different than the capabilities that you see in entrepreneurs. And we believe that the right thing for us to do was to really industrialize that innovation and make sure that in the early days that we could go through the transformation that's necessary to compete for a long period of time. Sometimes companies put off those investments, put off those more difficult decisions. And I'm proud of Motive and frankly, the InvestCloud team for being willing to deal with that challenge. To your point, because I want to make sure that I address it, certainly we had some clients who had dealt with some challenges in the industry in the digital business, not in the APL business, but in the digital business. And my own personal philosophy is go have a conversation, figure out what we can do. And the beauty here is we have a lot of clients who love the technology. Historically, it's been the implementations that have been more difficult. And so we've spent the last year really focused on how do we industrialize and scale our implementation processes, enhance our technologies to make those experiences better. We've won several new logos, so we feel like we're in the right direction. But there's no shortcut, right, for coming back in and fixing things. And we're making progress, and I feel like we have room to grow, but we're in a good place as we start 2025.
No shortcuts. That should be every
No
CEO's
shortcuts.
motto, right? But
Yes.
it always causes problems. All right, so
Yes.
let's talk about. So you mentioned innovation, and I think that's an important part. And it's very difficult for companies that have been as successful as InvestCloud. It's a double-edged sword. You become successful, you gain large market share, and that's both on the legacy InvestCloud side and the APL side. APL being one of the largest providers of managed account technology in the industry. As you grow, you run into the innovator's dilemma. Now we've got this huge backlog of legacy clients that now kind of control our direction. Everything we're doing is for them. So how do you balance the need for stability and scalability with having time for innovation, having resources available to do innovative things?
Yeah, it is. It is called the innovator's dilemma for a reason. And figuring out what are the right ways to allocate your resources. I define strategy as the allocation of scarce resources to accomplish a series of goals and objectives over time, right? And resources are scarce, right? High quality resources are scarce, and whether those are financial resources, talent, people, time, like all of those things have to be aligned. And and to the extent that we are clear about who we want to be and what we want to do, it allows us to make those kinds of decisions. So qualitatively, right, creating that framework is something that we're doing at InvestCloud. And I mentioned it earlier, innovation innovation has to be industrialized. It has to make a difference. A lot of times innovations are created that aren't able to scale.
Mm-hmm.
APL, as you know, is the largest managed account platform in the world, frankly. And you can't have little tidbits of innovation. You need innovation that can scale, make a difference, like the PMA, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But it's about being able to, how do I allocate my resources to do things that will allow me to bring innovation at scale? And the two strategies that we're focused on right now are PMA. And then in the digital wealth business, we've kind of got a banner of smart. And how do we use the data that's resident in the digital wealth system, both on the client and the advisor side, to create actionable insights that allow advisors to be more efficient and clients to have better relationships through the utilization of that data. So lots of opportunity out there, but we have to make choices, and those are the choices that we're making.
And that leads us into our next topic. One of the choices you made is to bet heavily on alternative investments. According
Yes.
to every report I've seen, alternative investments are exploding. JP Morgan's talking about trillions and trillions of dollars in things like private credit, asset-backed fund offerings, and other alternatives. And you guys have jumped in with both feet. Can you talk about the decision to do that and the product that you recently announced?
Yeah. And again, thanks for asking about that. Look, there have been certain trends in wealth that have been talked about for a while. I think the classic example is the multi generation, right? The transfer of wealth across generations. Boomers are going to live to be 150, and therefore, who knows when it's actually going to happen? But it's starting,
Hopefully
right?
with us,
Another, yeah, yeah.
right?
No, I got it. I got it. Right, I got it. And there'll be generations that'll be skipped, and then you've got, I think, the rightful focus on women as a category of where the power is moving, and any number of areas, right, that we've been talking about. One of the things that most people don't know is, although I'm probably most famous for working at Fiserv for 15 years, the early part of my corporate career started at the old IDS Financial Services,
Hmm.
right? So I grew up in the kitchen table world of financial planning. And so that, like they were talking about strategies then. Some of them are still in place. They were some of the early innovators on things like financial planning. Well, we went from kitchen table financial planning to robo, and now we're all back to advice again,
Hmm.
right? And so the thing, some things changed a little bit like bell bottoms, right? They cycle back every 20 years, whether we like it or not. But in this case, what's happened is you've had a convergence, and you can't see these trends happen unless you have convergence. And the convergence that you have is on the asset management side. You've got the big firms who have done incredible things around the distribution, right, into on the, whether it's on the corporate side or with private family wealth. But the big untapped area has been around the broader wealth market. And so you've got the asset management group very focused on it. You've got the wealth firms focused on it. So now it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how, and then ultimately a matter of when. And as it turns out, all of this is going to happen on the basis of models. And in order to do that, you're going to need a separately managed account that is funded on the basis of models. And we, as you noted, happen to be the largest managed account provider in the country. And so, with over 3 trillion of assets, 10 million accounts, nearly 4 million models. And so we kind of sit in the center. And I've always said I'd rather be lucky than good. This is a time of where I think luck actually matters. And we had begun working on this actually back a year or so ago, and so we had a bit of a head start. And so our first version will be launched by the summer. Kind of live. We'll be live before that, but our first production version, our V1, and then we'll over the next call it 18 months, we'll deliver an incremental 4 versions, 30, 40 different feature function, right? And really allow this to be as industrial strength as you would see in any of the other sleeve structures that exist in the managed accounts, right? So the PMA is a separate sleeve that allows private investments. And right now that could be a private equity investment. It could be a semi-liquid. It can be any variety of a wrap, but maybe in the future you'll see folks hold crypto or other kinds of privates, generally traded privates and I think this will open it up and allow alpha to move to a broader
Mm.
base, which is really the great reward for doing this, right? And we're excited to be part of that.
I wrote a LinkedIn post about this announcement. I was pretty excited about it because of the potential of expanding managed accounts into alternatives, and because of the scalability of managed accounts, specifically the UMA structure. It would enable alternatives to be pushed through to a lot of clients that aren't able to access it now, or at least aren't able to manage it as easily. Where it's like a separate tab, it's in a separate company. You're working with one of these other marketplaces, so it doesn't lend itself to a holistic experience either for the client or for the advisor. So, are you planning, if I can dig a little bit into building another network here? That the alternative investment providers would be funneling their products in through APL, InvestCloud APL, like the old Galaxy network used to work.
So our objective and what we announced is a two-part strategy. The PMA, the sleeve, right? That will allow the advisors to make sure that we're managing this appropriately. And let's not forget that in order to really get the private market investments right, the alternatives right, there's going to end up needing to be a credit element of it as well, right? And so
Mm.
we see a great opportunity to bring that together, working with asset manufacturers, banks, our clients to help make that happen. Secondly, is the PMA network. And to your question, Craig, I do see this as the creation of a network. Like ultimately, for this to scale, if you go back and look at the old kind of the early days of payments,
Mm.
Craig, you may be able to remember this. I remember a time when I had to look at the back of my ATM card to know what ATM machine, what network I could use at that ATM machine. And ultimately that all went away and there was just a common network. Well, point of sale was the same way, right? Right. It was like, okay, does my card work here? How will it work? I'm not so sure. Right. So if you want to get velocity and confidence, you need to create a common experience, the same everywhere, and one that you don't have to think about. I remember the early days, I always counted the money as it came out of the ATM.
Mhm.
We don't really have to do that anymore. I'm old, so I do it
Mhm.
anyway, but you don't have to. And that's because with a 99 and 3/9% level of accuracy, that's going on. And the network will allow us to bring all the providers in. The managed account piece, the SMA, the UMA piece of it is important, but it goes from the manufacturer of the product, right, all the way through a very large cycle, and it includes the intermediaries like Case and I Capital, it includes custodians, it includes uh, um, other technology providers that are part of it, whether it be fund admin or other players that are going to fit in there. There's a whole level of cyber and cyber defense, right? That ultimately, and these are assets that are typically held for a longer period. So we think by bringing that together, by certifying as being members of the the PMA network, that in fact we'll be able to create the confidence that's necessary on the wealth management side to have advisors comfortable selling this pretty complicated product, right, to their clients.
Yeah, it seems like the potential is endless there, especially when you look at the number of asset managers, distributors, and other alternative providers that are exploding in different areas. As you mentioned, private credit, other private equity, real estate, other types of funds and REITs and things. There's new ones coming up all the time. So being able to have access to that in a secure environment as part of your existing managed account platform seems like a tremendous benefit.
Yeah, we're super excited about that. And again, if you think about it as a $30 trillion market today in the normal wealth space, ex family office, you're talking about a low single digit level of penetration at
Mm.
best. And if it gets up to even a 10% level of penetration, you're talking about very, very significant numbers and very significant opportunity.
Does in your strategy, InvestCloud or the APL division has never been a TAMP or an RIA in terms of offering those types of services. You do outsource services like performance reporting and billing, things like that,
Yeah.
but none of the fiduciary related services like trading. Do you plan on adding that as a feature?
We do not. We serve, as you know, some of the larger camps in the country, and we think it's pretty good business to not be competing with your
Mhm.
clients, and so therefore we don't see that we need to go down that road, or should go down that road, and we see such incredible opportunity to be the enabler, right, as opposed to having to go end to end.
I'm sure that's good to know for all your clients. Um,
Yes,
Going
yes, it
looking back
is.
at the PMA, you mentioned that you will be able to rebalance in the account with one of the
Yep,
sleeves being alternative investments. Alternative investments are traditionally illiquid and
yep.
difficult to move in and out of. So how will the rebalancing work if you've got private credit and I can't sell this for X number of years or I have gating, certain capital requirements over the time? Will the rebalancer handle that?
Well, I mean, look, it to some extent it depends, Craig. Are you holding the actual the actual private credit, a percentage of a private credit fund, or are you holding it as a semi-liquid that has been wrapped by something else? And like I think we're still in the early days of that innovation, but in the more traditional model, I mean, you won't be rebalancing it every day because, in
Mhm.
fact, the values won't be changing every day.
Mhm.
But what you will have to watch is that as updates to the values come to play, do you get model drift, and how do you adjust on that basis? And so there's going to be a different level of complexity. And for us, our goal is to make sure that we automate all of that so that advisors again are getting the intelligence that's necessary and not kind of having to be behind the proverbial eight ball. And as you know, because you know the tech well, I think we have a 40 sleeve capacity plus or minus, and we could always add to it. But there are there's tons of opportunity to even ultimately we may find that we want separate sleeves for each of the different kinds of private market investments. And so
Mhm.
that's one of the beauties of being in early is we'll be able to work with our clients to create what they need, not what we think the market actually should
Mhm.
need.
It's a mix. Sometimes you know what the market needs before it does, and sometimes you listen to the market and see what they want.
That's right.
Right.
And they ultimately have to converge to be able to to deliver the value that you hope through your stack.
Hmm. So drilling down a little bit more into the network, and also looking at your role as chairman of Motive, Motive has a wide portfolio of other companies in our space, one of them being Case.
Hmm.
So will Case be part of their network? I imagine not, you wouldn't want to compete directly with them. So how will firms like Case, like Case competes with, deal with this PMA? Is it complementary? Complementary? Is it running in parallel? How will that work?
Yeah, I think it's completely complementary. There's no we you have to take if you think about the ecosystem from manufacturing to ultimate liquidity, all the different elements that need to fit into that network. We also think that the network has to have more than a single participant, right? So think about custodians. How many custodians, Craig, can you think of? And if I give you 10 seconds, how many custodian names can you come up with?
Quite a few.
Right. So we can't say we only work with X. So one of the portfolio companies that we own is Beta Next. I think you
Mhm,
talked to Bob not long ago.
mhm,
We would certainly want Bob and Beta Next to be in the network, but we would also want Tim Goki at Broadridge and NFS and Stephanie Ferris at FIS and Schwab, like all of the different players that have custodial angles in this. So we see ourselves as being not competing with these folks, but helping to bring them together in a more standardized way to create velocity. It's really about velocity and confidence.
Yeah, it's interesting because there is a lot going on when it comes to any alternative platform and the way the distributors work and the way the construction works. There's so many different steps that come before the account, any kind of sleeve-based platform. So being able to provide that opportunity for other firms to come in and plug into the APL platform to provide whatever particular alternatives they offer. Structured notes, there's a number of companies that do that. Annuities, fixed and variable annuities could plug in there as well. So
That's
it
right.
seems like the opportunities are quite wide.
And Craig, to that end, it's probably important to draw the distinction between the PMA network, which will actually be a separate stack deeply integrated into APL. And therefore there may be actually other managed account providers who
Mm,
end up being part of the network because our goal is to enable alts across the entire community of wealth management customers. And
mm.
so there are, as you know, we do a really great job at the top end of the market, but we're not going deep into the RIA community today. And so there may be other things that we can do to create relationships and create network accessibility.
Well, that's going to lead you into other issues. I mean, you have probably heard about the attempts by the industry to build a model hub that would be used by everyone, and that never seems to work because the incentives aren't there on both sides, right?
That's
The
right.
asset managers are incentivized to use it because it's easier for them, but the
Mhm.
sponsors aren't because there's no benefit to them. So,
Right.
wouldn't you see that the same way here, that competitors wouldn't want to use your alternative network? They want to build their own because they don't want to be plugged into what you've got. Right.
Look, that is a natural reaction if you think about the PMA network as a competitor. You know probably better than anyone, Craig, that the power of APL is the underlying engine, the pricing, what it can do, right? And that's been built over decades.
Mhm.
And no one's been able to replicate that for reasons that we could spend another podcast on, I'm sure. And it's when I think about the PMA network, my overarching belief is that a true network is only viable if the all the participants in the network can share in a value proposition, and the larger the network, the more value is there.
Mhm.
Right? Think about the payment networks. Think about Visa and MasterCard. They sit in the middle of this ecosystem. Lots of people play. Everyone plugs in. MasterCard and Visa and American Express also interact. They're also part of a network. So that the the fear that sits in people's minds about, oh, I can't be part of APL. You're not part of APL. but you can be part of the PMA network and get access to what the network can bring. And again, this is about moving the industry forward, right? That will be connected to APL, but it will also be connected to all the other players that we've been talking about here.
That would be quite the accomplishment if you can get
These
everyone
are
on the
hard.
same
Look,
page there.
I can hear, and I think rightfully, the skepticism in the look in banking and payments. There was always talk about, could you create a consortia? Could you create a consortia?
Hmm.
Those are hard to do. I don't want to create a consortia because no, like that's a little
Hmm.
bit like having 25 people in a room and no one's in charge,
Hmm.
right? I want to create a for-profit entity that is a network that everyone can benefit from if they're in the network.
Hmm.
And we know we don't do, as it relates to the creation of the PMA network, we know we're not going to be the custodian.
Hmm.
Like, so we got to get people in, we got to get people to trust and be part of it and build it in, kind of build that innovation in an industrialized and scaled way.
There's definitely a need for standardization when it comes to
Again,
alternatives,
part of a
right?
network, right?
Right. So because there's so many marketplaces that are launching, they always start with one particular product, whether it's structured notes or annuities or private credit, and then they realize that's not enough and they start expanding. And now you've got all these competing marketplaces, and then different providers
Yep,
um, will then align with one or the other if they're funding them, and then they start to compete. So if you
that's
could
right.
bring them together in the PMA network, that would certainly benefit the bigger sponsor clients you have.
And look, I actually think it'll allow everyone to play. If you're a niche if you're a niche $4 billion asset manager with an amazing private credit fund or amazing fill in the blank fund, and you can write to a common set of standards, you can put the product in the network. Why not? Like that's what I hope will happen over time. It'll actually create more innovation, create more opportunities for, again, for clients to win.
I want to pivot off of speaking of winning, but talk about some of your competitors in a general sense that a number of your competitors on the InvestCloud side have also changed CEOs in the last year or two, coincidentally, right?
Mhm.
Orion has changed, got a new CEO. AssetMark got a new CEO. Investnet just announced a new CEO.
Saw that. Yep.
Um, do you see that as just naturally in all industries going through these cycles, and that's going to change? And how will that change the way the dynamic between these companies and how they compete?
I think it goes back to your original question or a very early question on, kind of what led to the change, right? And businesses have cycles and leaders have cycles. And I'm actually, like, I having been Fiserv CEO for 15 years, I left because I felt like the organizations benefit from change. And when you're at the very top, right, change, it's not like I can go do another job. Like, that's it. And so there's a natural cycle, and we may be at a point where there is just a bunch of natural cycles happening at the same time. You also have private equity engaged in some of these, and that'll facilitate change. And I think it's good for the industry. I think bringing new perspective and fresh thinking and new energy is great. And the better the competitors are, the better you will be.
A couple more questions before we wrap up. So, speaking of new energy, we've got some new energy in Washington, and new administration has come in. Regulatory wise, obviously, that's as a regulated industry, we're very, very concerned about how that is going to impact the industry and how the regulatory environment will change. And you, in your commencement address at UW Milwaukee, you quoted Charles Dickens' novel, *The Tale of Two Cities*. It tells about a time of chaos, conflicts, and despair, as well as happiness. Do you expect more chaos, conflicts, despair, or happiness in the next 4 years for our industry?
I think it's going to be a little of all of it. I think I think on one hand, I suspect that you'll see some lightening of the regulatory front. I think we can already see there's going to be day-to-day chaos in a way that's different than what we've seen historically, and that will create that runs the risk of creating uh, some emotional roller coastering that's a
Mhm.
word, right, in the minds of consumers, and it'll be interesting to see how that affects consumer confidence. And we know that consumer confidence is an important driver as it relates to investment in the investment world. So I think we're gonna have a bit of all of it. I think over time, I think we're going to see positives for the business world, and I think in our industry, in the wealth generally in the wealth and asset management world, I think there's tons of growth sitting there, tons of opportunity, and I think it'll be good for us over the certainly over the intermediate term.
And just as at the end of the episode, I want to talk about something non-work related,
All
but I
right.
want to talk about a charity you work with called Children's Wisconsin that
Yes.
pairs mental health professionals with pediatricians to help children with mental health issues. I think that's an incredible organization. Can you talk a little bit about that and how people can help that?
Yeah. Well, thank you for bringing that up. Look, one of the things that I think most of us are generally ill prepared to handle is the multifaceted challenge of mental and emotional health issues. One of the things that has happened to me is I've reluctantly become a mental health advocate. My brother died by suicide in 2017, and that was the catalyst to look for a way to really give back. And we identified at Children's Wisconsin, they happen to own their own pediatric network. And they came up with a pilot concept of trying to put mental health professionals, pairing them up literally in the pediatrician's offices, doing screeners with every single child. We see about 175,000 kids a year. So screening every kid every time, and then figuring out, do they need something? And we're through that through that cycle. I wish we had 3 hours. I could talk more
Mhm.
about it, but we've been able to deliver therapy services to 30,000 kids a year. We've also created a mental health urgent care center. If you have a mental health emergency, which are becoming more and more frequent, you've got nowhere to go but an ER, and an ER is not the right place.
Mhm.
And when you think about the fact that the for children, the fastest growing age group of kids with suicidal ideation and trying to take their own lives is in the ages of 6 to 10. Think about that.
Mhm.
6 years old to 10 years old, right? There's so much that we could all be doing. So this is just one way. The silver lining to my brother dying by suicide has been the ability to go help. So I help at Children's Wisconsin. Certainly, people can contribute there. I'm very involved with a mental health marketplace called Project Healthy Minds, which is the only national digital health marketplace. Another big opportunity out there. But this is going to be, in my mind, this is going to be the equivalent of the 2020 pandemic is going to be the mental health epidemic that is going to be
Mhm.
with us for the next 20 years, and hopefully we'll have made progress by then. But it is going to be the leadership challenge of our times. I'm highly confident.
Yeah, it's an incredible opportunity to help people who aren't really being helped now. And I mean, I know the American Academy of Pediatricians announced a national emergency in child and adolescent mental health,
That's right.
and we all know it's a lot of it's driven by social media. And it's I'm just glad my kids are didn't go through that when they grew up. My youngest is 21, and I'm sure yours are older as well than that. So
Yep.
we missed that fortunately, but now a lot of other parents are kind of struggling with what to
Right.
do.
Well, and frankly, our grandchildren, and if we
Mhm.
don't make progress here, our grandchildren are going to have a tough time. Like there's just a, the idea of cyberbullying and those kinds of issues are just, it's hard to even get your head around that, given how perhaps we grew up, right, Craig?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, definitely. So if people want to donate, would they just go to the Children's Wisconsin website?
childrenswisconsin.org, and we'd love for you to participate if it makes sense, but we'd also love for you to for listeners to get engaged in their own communities around bringing mental health to all age groups and all categories and just raising awareness. The premise of our the whole program is by changing the conversations, by changing the checkup, you can change the trajectory of people's lives. It's even just having this conversation, right? hopefully at least one listener will take it and say,
Mhm.
I should talk to my my spouse, my child, my brother, my cousin, my nephew, my uncle, my grandparent, whatever it is, and just having those conversations make a difference in and of themselves.
Yeah, more people should take a look at that. So we're going to wrap here now. So back to the business end of the podcast. Where can people find more information about InvestCloud?
InvestCloud.com, Craig, you know it. We're there. Lots of fun stuff going on, and people can reach out, send an email on LinkedIn. They can go to you and you can bring them to us.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of exciting things going on there.
Absolutely. Jeff, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's Craig again. Here are my top three takeaways from this episode. InvestCloud's focus on industrializing innovation and scaling their capabilities to better serve their large client base is something Jeff is focusing on and trying to use it as turning the company around from some previous issues they've had. Now, this includes the development of the new PMA product, private markets account, to enable alternative investments to be held in a managed account. Jeff's strategy of building an alternative investment network to create a standardized platform and ecosystem for alternatives is, I find, to be very interesting and reminiscent of InvestCloud's former life as the investment services division of Fiserv, and before that, was CheckFree APL when they had the Galaxy Network, which brought them to prominence by connecting sponsors of managed accounts with asset managers. Now, the goal of this new PMA network is to drive a velocity and confidence in this growing market by bringing together custodians, asset managers, and other key players. I thought it was interesting, Jeff's perspective on leadership. Businesses and leaders naturally go through cycles, and change at the top can bring new perspectives and energy that benefit the organization. Several of InvestCloud's competitors have also seen CEO changes, which he sees as a positive for the industry. And maintaining stability and trust with clients, partners, and employees is a critical challenge that Jeff and InvestCloud have to address. I'm glad we had time to talk about Jeff's personal passion for mental health advocacy, stemming from a tragic personal loss. He's heavily involved with Children's Wisconsin's efforts to integrate mental health professionals into pediatric care, highlighting the importance of addressing mental health, especially for younger generations. And you can check out, if you wanted to donate, it's at Children's Wisconsin Hospital. You can find it online. And that's it. You've reached the end of another episode of the Wealth Tech Today podcast. Thanks for listening. But before you go, head over to our website, EzraGroup.com, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and sign up for our newsletter. Once a month, you'll receive an email chock full of wealth management goodness, news, information, and updates. You will not be disappointed. Thanks again for listening, and talk to you all again next time.